Welcome to The Bars Open with Beth and Greg. Cheers and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Bar is Open. Thanks so much for joining us this morning or this afternoon or whenever you're going to watch it.
Yeah.
It is morning for us.
For us, it is morning. So I got my little sexy raspy voice going because, well, it's early.
It's early.
I was laughing because when you started scheduling this, I was like, shit, Greg's not even usually up at this time.
I'm not. Absolutely. So thank you again. I've got Andrea Up Late with us from the True Crime podcast, Failure to Stop and Nightshift podcast, out on Patreon is where the Nightshift podcast is. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, super excited.
We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. I'm excited.
Awesome. So again, 300th episode.
Wow.
300
of these.
Wow.
I wonder, we've never kept track of is how many hangovers I've had after the shows. I mean, I imagine it's probably right around 300 as well.
200 or so. Yeah, something like that.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, you might be coming to this show with one.
Right. Exactly.
She's definitely carrying
It's
something.
morning time.
Yeah,
it's morning time.
Exactly. So go out, subscribe to the podcast, to Beth and Greg, or The Bar's Open with Beth and Greg on YouTube and all the places. You can check us out at all the places to get the audio and stuff like that. So again, thank you so much for coming on. We've got some fun stuff to talk about today. Should be good to go. Let's jump into it. What got you into true crime podcast, current podcasting, like the way you guys do it, where you're covering cases, those sorts of things?
Yeah. So, I'll make this. I'll try to narrow it down and make it as quick as possible. Because there's a lot of kind of little rabbit holes I can go into it, but
all good.
Just to take it back a little bit. So Eric Tansey is my co-host on Night Shift on our Tuesday night show. And so I've known Eric now for probably, 17 years. So know he and his wife and his family well. And so when he started with Failure to Stop, about, I guess 3 years ago now, that kind of trended in one way, and then the network went solo and, kind of like broke away, and there was like Mike the Cop and then no Mike the Cop, and things were kind of ever flowing. I think we've gotten into a good little niche now. We kind of
for sure
found our little spot. But so Failure to Stop has 5 shows a week, and the Tuesday night show is my show, my crime show. So to answer your question, I am a nurse, I am a mom, but a few years ago, I started just kind of I've always been interested in like the crime stories and things like that. Obviously there's a huge market for that. A lot of people are. Yeah. And a few years ago, I got involved. I'm here on the East Coast, and there's a local organization called the Q Center. It's CUE, and it's Community United Effort. So I want to kind of throw them a little out there because they do a lot of great work. And so they basically head up search for missing persons, and they also go through and try to pick up the slack and work on cases that have gone cold. And a lot of times that was for victims that maybe live high risk lifestyles that kind of fall through the cracks and aren't, not a lot of follow up. Maybe they don't have a lot of family, maybe they do. So anyway, I got involved with them. They're locally based here where I am, but they're a national organization. And so I kind of started working with them a little bit. But prior to that, the reason I found them is I just Eric's wife and I had considered having a podcast together, a crime podcast. And then between all of our kids and life, it just kind of didn't happen. Time went on, it didn't happen. But excuse me, in the process of that, I started looking at cold cases around the area that I'm in now. And one just kind of spoke to me, and I just started kind of honestly getting a little hyper focused on it and kind of went down all the tunnels with that. And to the point that I kind of figured it out.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So in the process of doing that, I learned about the Q Center because they had been working on this case. They also had it figured out. I come to find, so I called them and I'm like, I know this sounds crazy. Like I'm just like a mom, a nurse sitting at home, like on Google, but I think this makes sense to me, And they were like, Yeah, no, we already know. The guy is already in prison for something else right now. I can't charge him on this right now. But
shit.
So I was like, oh, wait, no, I got it. I'm like, I mean, y'all got it, but I also got it without knowing.
Came to the same conclusion. Yeah, that's cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's how that happened. And then fast forward, never thought that I would be on a podcast for it by any means. Right. It was just interesting work. And I always love the psychology behind things. I talk about that on the show all the time. So the way people's minds work just fascinates me. And that's part of, I think, my intrigue with it. So last year, I guess, Eric contacted me. He was like, hey, look, we're changing some things around. We maybe want to do like a true crime thing. Would you want it? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, you know what I mean? Like, nobody's going to want to like, well, and like, who's going to want to hear me talk about, you know what I mean? Like, who am I to talk about this? You know, and y'all are all doing your cop thing over there. I'm not a cop, you know, whatever. And so we did one show. I drove to the studio that's like 2 hours from me, and we were like, we'll see how it goes. And it was like, we'll do one more week. I'll do one more show. And if it lands, it lands. And in my head, probably not. And then now I'm approaching, next month will be a year on night shift. So
wow,
it's amazing.
Cool.
Get it going. Yeah.
That's cool really how the kind of the evolution happens, right?
Well, especially since you were already so like passionate about it, it just made it easy to flow into talking about it in an actual setting where people are going to listen. So that's really cool.
Yeah. My biggest hurdle was the fact that we film live. And so I was like, oh, wait, they have to like look at me while I'm talking. Can I just like record or something? Right. But I'm getting used to it. But it
takes a while. Yeah, absolutely. That's biggest thing.
Well, and I don't watch our show because I don't like hearing myself.
Right.
And then all I do is nitpick, like, why did I do that to my hair? You know, like I just, all these things. So, it was a big step. Like when he first, because we did this because the pandemic, right? Like he needed something to do. I needed him to have
something to do.
Yeah.
Besides just drinking beer.
And so he was like, we're going to do a podcast. I was like, shut up. No, we're not. And literally like, we are. And we started off with a phone in our backyard. And it took a little, like, sometimes I'd be like, why would anybody want to listen? Like what drives that, you know? So I totally, when you say like, who's going to pick it up, you know? So I totally get it. But it definitely has been fun. We've met a lot of great, like we've actually through the show gone to some weddings, you know, people we've only met through the show. We went to a few weddings that way, and people have come to visit, you know, so it's definitely been fun and an aspect that I never considered doing ever. So it's kind of cool to hear you say, you know, I had this passion about it, but I never thought, you know, little old me get on there and talk about it. So that's really cool. Especially like, it's really cool to hear that you figured it out. Cause that's some dedication.
Well, I always feel funny saying that. Cause I'm like, well, I mean, I guess I didn't, they did, but then I'm like, well, I mean, I did.
You still did.
Yeah. I didn't know that they did.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the guy was already in prison for another crime.
Yeah, and I think Drew and I might go into this case at some point, he and I together to talk about it. Drew, one of our other co-hosts on Failure to Stop, but yeah, it's a serial case. And,
oh, really?
And, you know, surprise, surprise, he's a trucker. And so, you know, it's a story as old as time, but yeah, so
don't give away any of the.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
Wow. No, it's fine. But I had gotten in touch with, social media, right? So I got in touch with the daughter of the victim, and we went back and forth quite often. And I was able to get the autopsy reports from the detective that's kind of taken over the cold case and look at that. So, and then being a nurse kind of helped with that a little bit. You know, it's kind of easy to read through that. So yeah,
that's awesome. Wow,
interesting. Yeah,
that's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. When we start thinking about the different case, or when I've watched your show and start thinking about the different cases you've covered, you really kind of hit on some current topical ones, and then some of the kind of ones that have been big cases in the past, or even just ones that are smaller, or maybe not. I don't want to call them smaller. They just aren't as
publicized
publicly. As well known, but you bring a lot of light to those cases, which is awesome. I think that's a really cool kind of genre to be in. It's true crime, but you're bringing light to these cases. What was your favorite case so far that you've covered? I mean, it's hard to say favorite because they're not.
No, I know really what you mean.
Good content.
And it's evolved a little bit. Like, you know, when you start, you don't know what, you know, I didn't know where I was going to like find my little fit and feel comfortable. And nothing's off the table. Like we've covered conspiracy. Sometimes, you know, it's more silly, like conspiracy theories and like UFOs and, you know, crop circles. And we've done a couple of those. A lot of people really like that stuff. Yeah. people like some of the almost like the missing 411 type stuff where like in national parks, there's
we've
like
done
a people
couple
missing.
of shows on those. Yeah.
Right. So there are people who like that kind of almost like a paranormal element or something weird. Our mainstay is usually, I tend to do, not necessarily by design, but it just tends to be probably because it's most interesting to me, unsolved cases. And then I do, to your point, enjoy the ones that are maybe not as well known because a few things. Number one, when it's a well-known case, I know for me, this is my own hang up, but I want to be really, really well prepared. And so if it's a case like and we probably are going to do a Jean Bonnet or something like that at some point, but like a Dahmer, a Bundy, a whatever, I'd rather approach those almost like a group of a bunch of them and talk more about their similarities and differences than just talk about, because at this point we've all heard it.
There's been a doc on it somewhere.
There's so many. So then everybody's going to speak their piece and I'll be like, yes, I know that. I'm getting to it. Like it's going to be. So I do like the ones that are a little bit less known for that reason. And then separately, just like you said, to bring light to it, because sometimes a case could have occurred in 1996, which for those families, doesn't feel like what 27 years ago, right? Like that feels very current to them. They're still very much living that reality. And maybe it was on Unsolved Mysteries from out of Kansas in 1998.
Right.
But it's come and gone. And, we're still not hearing about it. So even if it reaches national attention, we're not hearing about it. So I do enjoy finding the ones that are a bit less.
That's cool. And I'm sure the people that are involved, like the families, appreciate it because it is
they hear
older.
It, I hope that they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
That's the thing. We didn't have social media back then, right? I mean,
exactly. Oh my goodness.
The internet was around, of course, but it was still kind of fresh and people I wasn't using it to do research. I was using it to do homework and stuff like that.
Right.
So
we just did, to that point, we just did I've gotten to where, like when we open the show, if depending on the year the crime occurred, I do like a little, just to kind of lighten it up before we start, like a little like pop culture, whatever. So if it happened in 1992, like our last case was 1992, I'll give just some, like these were the movies in 1992 that, this is what was going on in the world and whatever. Right. To bring us back because things change so quickly.
Right.
And man, that one did, when you were just talking about social media, we were talking about, it was a woman who went missing, a young woman in the 5 Points area of in Columbia, South Carolina. So she went to USC. Right.
Okay.
So the same area that the girl in 2019 tragically got in what she thought was her Uber. If you remember, it was not her Uber. And this guy kills her. They find her body, but they found her body very quickly within hours. Some turkey hunters found it, but they were able to use all the current technology, phone, cell phone cameras, security cameras, CCTV, all that stuff to basically track the guy from having gotten her to where her body was found.
Yeah.
Well, this girl back in 92, same area. We don't know what happened to her. There's some crazy coincidences there and some theories for sure, but we didn't have any of that technology. And so when I looked back and did the pop culture news of 1992, I think it was 0.42% of US population had cell phones.
See, there you go. Yeah, exactly.
And computers, I think it was like Windows 3. And I forget the statistic on how many people, most people didn't even have home computers at all.
Right.
I think there were 26. That's what it was that blew my mind. If you were to get online, if you were to go, let's say maybe to the library or some fancy place that would have a computer and you get on the internet, there were 26 web pages available in 1992.
Holy cow.
Think about that.
Right? Like
we all had the little AOL, discs to put in to dial up.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy.
26 websites. So it's grown a ton. And so that does change a lot when it comes, obviously it changes everything when it comes to crimes and those kinds of things.
And being able to trace them back and, follow people and everything.
That's really cool.
As that goes. Yeah. No,
that's crazy.
It's amazing to think kind of how the times have changed and how even just everyday people, right, can actually help to solve things. Sure. So when people say something, it really does actually work nowadays, and
well, we were talking the other night about that documentary on the guy that was killing cats. I don't know if you've heard that. He was killing cats and literally people across the world.
Yes. I saw that a while back.
They used the internet to check things out. Yeah. So it's incredible. There's power to be had.
Yeah.
That I don't think we realize we have that power to make a difference and stuff.
Right, absolutely.
So that's cool.
So I have an interesting story that I want to get your opinion on.
Uh-oh.
So this is a Columbian Police Chief. We always, so on our podcast, the bar is open. We try and bring up, it's kind of top. We just bring up random things. We try and stay away from like mainstream.
We try not to get political, basically.
There's too much shit going on in the world, right? So I try and find fun, weird stories to talk about, as is Beth. So this one, Columbia's president removes police chief who cited using exorcisms to catch fugitives. So Gustavo Petro removed General Henry Sanabria after he claimed that police had used exorcism to catch drug kingpin and guerrilla leaders.
Interesting.
I mean, if you're not going to use the supernatural or whatnot, well,
it's very big. It's very big in there.
So Colombian President Gustavo, I just said this this was a couple of weeks ago on Wednesday, removed National Police Director who had talked about using exorcisms to catch fugitives. Neither Petro nor Defense Ministry elaborated on reasons for his dismissal. And basically, they have an internal investigation by the ministry on whether he inappropriately allowed his religious beliefs to infringe on his duties.
Okay.
I'm just saying, again, why wouldn't you exorcise the demons?
So he's exorcising criminals.
He's using exorcisms to then catch bad guys. I don't know how those link together.
That's what I was trying to put.
Some way he figured it out.
Okay.
I'm like, what would happen if we did that today? I mean, we're kind of going that way.
Was he successful?
I don't think he was successful.
Oh,
I think so I very briefly read up on it prior to the show. I think he considers himself successful. I think he thinks that some of the successes in the cases were due to these practices. Right. So, yeah.
I mean, it's all relative,
maybe
right?
It's subjective.
Yeah. It's subjective. Yeah. How do you feel about that? But I love, he's just trying, and it's kind of like we were just talking about social media.
He's willing to try. Other side. Yeah. I mean, it can be a very big, the whole religious part can be a very big part of their heritage. So, I mean, I guess I could see him embracing that comfortably.
Right. And it said when I read it, he is obviously he's Catholic. He subscribes to this way of thinking. This is what he practices at home. Mm-hmm. But then it kind of looked like, I'm not sure if they have a new chief in town or if they're leaning more toward a certain demographic now, they're starting to lean more left or whatever, then maybe they had been a little bit more conservative before. I'm not super sure because it almost seemed like
it's a little.
Well,
foggy.
They don't go in detail on what the guy did, right? So maybe he was doing wazoo stuff that they're like, guy, you gotta quit doing do it at home. You can't do this on the scene. This is a crime scene. Put the sage away or whatever.
Take the eggs out from under the bed. Let's just get rid of that stuff.
Stops,
exorcisms,
water on stuff. We still have to develop this crime scene. But so maybe, maybe they're trying to prove a point and make sure that it's secular and that they have separated church and state. So I don't really know their current climate, politically there like that. But it's hard to tell if they're trying to prove a point or if maybe he was over
a little
the top
off.
Because they're not
the deep
super
end.
specific.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to picture your co-host partner, Eric or Drew or any of them just walking up
Eric
and
could use an exorcism.
Sprinkling, holy water on somebody before you're
on a suspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Something like that. It's always good. There's so many of these fun stories out there. And by the way, we are celebrating again our 300th. Cheers. Cheers to you, Andrea.
Cheers.
Thank you again so much for joining us. We've got some mimosas this morning because it is morning. This is the earliest
morning. And it's fancy champagne.
Yeah, and we're drinking out of child cups.
Well, no, they're tequila glasses.
Is that what those are?
Yeah,
I just found some glasses in the cupboard. So
that's funny.
All good.
Sorry.
What is when you think of all the crazy stories? We went down you talked about a couple of them. What's the absolutely either from your without giving any personal stuff or anything like that from the victims or anything as far as that goes, of course. What's the craziest story you've ever heard? That you've dug into, when you think about all the nuances or getting into that.
So there's some crazy stuff that I don't cover a ton. I try not to do. I'll do a little bit of stuff that involves children. I don't do a whole lot that involves kids. But in terms of just salacious, crazy, makes you just, sit in awe would be probably my very first which I don't want to encourage anyone to listen to my very first episode because
we're all that way.
You were learning.
Yeah.
It makes me, as my son would say, like the cringe is off of the charts. I can't go back and watch it at all. It's terrible.
That's hilarious.
But the case itself, and I did that on purpose. It was my first one. So I wanted something over the top.
Just a banger.
Yeah, just a banger, just to see maybe it would like take, it would absorb the fact that my actual podcasting was going to be subpar. So yeah, it was it was the first woman to ever be imprisoned or given the sentence of life in prison in Australia. Her name is Catherine Knight, excuse me. And she, to make it short, she had quite a history of being she had a terrible childhood. And so we talk about that a lot in a lot of these cases, right? So the nature versus nurture part of things.
Yeah, they brought up.
And so terrible childhood and just kind of unstable home and abuse and different things like that. But moving forward, she grows up. She's really tall, like red hair, tall, kind of abrasive, kind of, whatever. But she was known to kind of start fights at school, even with the boys, she fist fights, that kind of thing. But she gets this job at basically at a butcher shop there locally in her little town in Australia. And she works there. But the accounts of the people who worked with her would talk about the fact that she bizarrely seemed to enjoy the slaughter and enjoy different aspects of that job in a way that it was not natural to them.
Yeah.
Right. And so she, I guess once you get up to a certain level there or a certain, job there at the place, you can take home you have your own set of knives that you bring home.
I can only imagine this going.
So she does, but she hangs them above her bed. Decor, and come to find out the rest of her house is decorated this way. So there's saws and pitchfork. I don't know, all these things.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of house or something.
So she has all these men, but it's crazy. That's what we started talking about because we're like, what is this woman doing? But these men just keep coming back. And whatever, the domestic violence is off the chart on her end.
She's beating and whatever.
With a frying pan to the head, unconscious. And then he comes back, these kinds of things. So it's one guy has a kid or two, another guy has another kid or two. Finally, she gets married. Even on their wedding night, she is angry with his lack of amount of wanting to consummate the marriage. I think they only consummated the marriage 3 times and she thought it should be 5 times or something like this. It was crazy. So he wakes up to her sitting on his chest, ready to pound him, beat him, I should say.
It's all right. It's an adult show.
And because she's angry, right? Well, long story short, he finally is going to get a divorce. His children were out. They were a bit older and he was going to get a divorce from her. He had a restraining order on her. He actually stayed out the night before. He decides to come back thinking she was going to be out of the home. Oh, no. And she gets home and she murders him violently. She's stabbing. The crime scene showed that he fought back a lot, from their upstairs bedroom, down the hall, down the stairs, into the kitchen, to the point that he had, I think, a handprint on the knob of the kitchen door.
Wow.
So he almost escaped. But when authorities, they get there because he didn't show up for work the next day, if I remember correctly, this was a year ago, but he didn't show up for work the next day and his buddies call it in. It was unusual. And they knew weird stuff was happening.
Violence was happening or abuse. Yeah.
So the police show up. They immediately see the handprint on the doorknob. They walk in and what they say as they start talking is that one guy in particular, one of the detectives said that he thought he brushed by, there was a curtain hanging in the middle of the kitchen because she even had a track system with the hooks. If you can picture in a butcher shop.
Yeah.
Like you can pull
or in a hospital or whatever.
Yes, exactly. With a curtain. Mm-hmm. So he passes by a curtain that he thought was wet, had just gotten wet. Well, when he passes the curtain, he sees the body of her husband on the floor that was skinned.
Oh my Lord.
Yes. Well, so the curtain was not a curtain.
Oh my God.
The man's
his skin. Oh Lord.
Yes. So she had completely
she's batshit crazy.
Just like she would have done at work. Right.
Wow.
With these animals.
Getting a hide.
They said she did such a good job that it was almost one full piece. That she was able to do it almost in one piece. and hung it up. So there's his body, but his body is missing his head.
Oh shit.
Correct. Yes.
Wow.
Skinned and decapitated, which they find his head in a pot bubbling on the stove.
Oh my God.
Oh Lord.
Jesus.
Wow.
And there were 2 plates, and these plates had been prepared with food. So it was like a meat portion and a veggie portion. The meat was actually his buttocks that she had cooked as steak. And she was going to serve that then to his children who were not home. Thankfully, they didn't get any of this.
Wow.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have noticed, Dad.
I mean, that's a whole new level of crazy.
That is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It absolutely is. That's what Leatherface.
So I was thinking, she is still in prison in Australia
she's still
today,
alive.
if you guys want to call her.
How old is she now? Do you know? Do you recall?
Yeah, she's in her 60s.
Okay.
She's in her 60s. It's actually funny. She goes by the term Nana, and we had quite a moment with this case, but Nana, and I think she like rehabilitates or like therapizes, if you will, women in the prison who are having a tough time.
Is that really the one you want to go to?
That's the one. That's the one.
Of all of them.
But then we find out at the very end, as I was telling the story, that Catherine actually has a twin sister. And so that's where now I want to take this. But she's been very quiet. She doesn't talk.
Dear God.
That's wow.
I said the craziest, but I wasn't expecting that. And I was thinking
too, because you said like the knives above her bed was like her decor and that she had that in other places. I mean, as a person, horny or not, right? You walk in this house and you see this weird stuff. Don't you just turn around and walk out?
I mean, if you're into S&M kind of things, it's one thing.
Like
a swing or something like that. That's one thing.
Yeah, that's one thing. But these are
not like a fillet knife.
Right. These are like instruments of pain.
Like whatever, even if it just fell.
And then it's funny because she says the guys kept coming back. I'm like, wow.
They were into it.
She must have been amazing in bed.
I mean, there's no other reason. I mean,
you know what I mean? Like she must have had some talent or something.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's what we kind of speculated.
There's no other, I can't. That's hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
As
crazy.
a guy,
that is crazy.
Like, okay. No, I don't want you to smack me either. But I was just thinking, I'm like, what? No, I don't want you to hit me at all.
No,
I'm not into that. I guess that's just me. I don't understand that.
Not even with a frying pan.
No,
yeah, exactly. So kind of a question off that. So as you learn these, as you go through these stories in these cases, do you use any of it as teaching stuff, like learning tools for your kids? How old? Well, if you don't want, if you have.
No, I can. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. I have 2 sons. They're like 13 and a half and 10.
Okay.
So, most of it is still just the same stuff you would already do, right? You're just a bit more hyper aware. Case in point, yesterday I was at the beach. So we're sitting there. My kids weren't there, but so we're sitting here, and I look up, and these 2 little girls are running around on the beach. And I can tell you that I'm, I fit all the realms in the sense that where I'm interested in a lot of different things. Like I'm scientifically minded because I'm a nurse. I lean a certain way politically. So I'm more kind of maybe conservative on certain ends. Separately, I'm more naturally minded though. So like I'm a nurse, but I don't really like medication for things unless it's absolutely necessary. I don't, you know what I mean? So I'm
holistic.
You like natural holistic things. Yeah. Absolutely. So meaning that like I had midwives for my birds and I whatever. And so I would not mind for my kids to run free and naked somewhere. I wouldn't really care. I also know the sign of the times, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So these 2 little girls were running on the beach. And normally I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but it just unsettled me so much because they were probably, I don't know. I have giant boys. It's hard to tell. They're little girls, but they were probably, let's say 4 and 6 or maybe 5 and 7.
Okay.
And they're running around with nothing but their little undies on. And they were just white cotton, just very quintessential little white undies on these little girls. And then they ran into the ocean and ran back out. And it was bothering me because I'm looking around thinking, I don't care. And they should be able to. I wish they could without it being weird. But I'm just seeing the people around and it was making me uneasy thinking about
watching
it.
Well, there's so many weirdos now. You know what I'm saying? Like,
so to answer your question about my own kids, it's the stuff that you would just already,
naturally.
This just reinforces it.
Right.
Reading the stuff over and over and over just reinforces it. Like I said, I don't do a lot with kids. We did cover the Delphi case, the big case in Indiana from 2017. That was they call it the down the hill case, where the guy says girls or guys down the hill, and those 2 girls walk down a hill.
Mm-hmm.
that was in 2017. They just arrested the guy in this past October, and think someone else is still in connection with it. But anyway, these 2 girls were violently murdered. And it's just things like, man, so
Just
all
be
the same
mindful
things.
of like kind of your
and the reason why I asked that
all of those
is because like, so I'm a little bit older than you guys. So I was like a teenager in the 80s, right? So like and my dad's retired he was retired DEA. And I remember like very specifically, especially in the 90s when X, what do they call it now? Molly's
ecstasy or whatever.
Yeah, those things are very
like
popular
and all that stuff.
Right. And I never touched anything. And people were like, why? I mean, I get it. And I was like, because my dad scared the shit out of me. Like he told me stories, that he would go undercover, the things that people would do, and they were desperate for the drugs that they needed. Like there's one time he had an informant and he was undercover, and the drug dealers knew he was an informant. So they were trying to get him to talk by withholding his drugs from him. And my dad was like, this man was so desperate. They finally gave him the drugs, but they didn't give him anything to use it. So they just gave him, I don't know what it was, heroin or whatever, but they didn't give him water. They didn't give him a needle. They didn't give him anything. And they were at a ranch and there was no water around. The guy was going to use battery water to mix it up and try to, and my dad was like, dude, that's going to kill you if you use that. And he's like, so he told me those stories. And so I never, ever wanted to do anything. I have 2 older brothers, 9 years and 14 years older than me. And my oldest brother, when I went to college, was like,
they're both law enforcement.
Yeah, they're both, my whole family is law enforcement. But my oldest brother was like, listen, I get it. College is a time for experimenting and figuring out who you are. But if you're going to do drugs, it must come from the earth. You should not take
like
anything man-made, And
Nothing
so
synthetic.
Nowadays you have to worry about that.
Between my dad and my brother, like I never ever like wanted to do, like I had friends that would do X and they'd be so tripped out, like they'd chew a hole through their lip because they were
gnarly.
And I was going to say,
bad.
like, conversely to your point, you don't want to find yourself needing it.
Right.
But like you said about safety or in teaching your kids or thinking about you even coming up, the things that can happen to you when you've lost your faculties, on the other side
absolutely.
of it.
100%.
You're on it and you're passed out. Like anything in the world could happen,
And let's face it, there were times already
your
like
inhibitions drop
just
as well.
getting drunk. Sometimes you're like, dude, I don't even know how we got home last night.
Right? We didn't have
that doesn't
Ubers.
happen anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, we didn't have Ubers.
And so it's like, but it's crazy because I think about that today. Like we're really, really good friends with our neighbors, and they have 2 beautiful young girls, like 12 and 16. And I'm like, how do you keep your kids without scaring them to death in today's world?
Exactly.
Because like you have to think these things through. And I know that my dad's stories were very effective. My brother's talks were very effective.
But they were dated even compared to today. Right? And you go like, now all you need is one of these things, a little cell phone, and you're on TikTok or Twitter or whatever.
And so much more influence at every turn.
It's just
I love kids, but they're stupid. Like there was a kid that died the other day that tried what was that game? No. He took cough medicine.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's like a Benadryl challenge.
Yeah, Benadryl challenge. And he took like 12 and died,
Benadryl.
And I'm like,
to make the trip, and he ended up ODing on Benadryl.
And I'm like, wow, I mean, you didn't have to be scared of that stuff when we were kids, like
I took it because
nobody would have ever thought about over, taking Benadryl to get high.
Like the NyQuil challenge or whatever.
We've just
Robitussin or whatever.
I don't know.
I mean, is that part of the, when you think of TikTok and all of these things that lower our attention span at every turn right now, if it takes more than 4 seconds, we don't on to the next thing.
We were talking about shorts last night, like how it impacts like podcast
but think about
viewership
that
and stuff
with
like that.
Brain wiring. And then even with drugs like that, like before
it is a dopamine
you
hit,
either
right?
wanted to get high or you didn't. And if you did, you'd have to find your buddies. You'd have to coordinate. It would, even with that, it's like we've lost steam. Like you have to, whatever's faster.
It was work.
So, oh, you got Benadryl in mom's cabinet? Hey guys, this will be fun. Let's put it on the internet and do it. Like,
it's crazy.
It's like at every turn, there's just no, the time of return has to be so much faster now.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's hard as a parent because you can't watch your kids 100% of the time, right? Like you have to give them some freedom. Plus you also need a life. So how do you how do you always know? Like, we don't have kids. This was my second marriage. I was older. I'm 6 years older than Greg. Like, we talked about it for like 2 minutes, and then he came back, thank the Lord, and said, no babies, we're good. But I can't imagine, like, I think I'd be a nervous wreck. I'd totally be a helicopter mom, 100%. And my kids would hate me because I feel like you have to stay on top of them so much right now.
Well, you do, but then you also become Charlie Brown's mom, right?
Because exactly. And they don't hear you, right? Because you're always nagging or something like that, right?
Yeah. Like, so for instance, my oldest has just been granted, we have, like the neighborhood I'm in is a bunch of kids, which is great. They all ride bikes together, play basketball together, whatever. Nice.
Yeah.
But they can pop out, and now they do have to cross a pretty decent sized road, but it's got a light and a crosswalk. He knows at least how to read it.
Look both ways, kind of thing.
Yeah. And so he crosses that, but he can then meet up with his buddy, and they've been allowed to bike to the mall, which is right there, like just a couple blocks away. So it's not far. It's enough that he feels really big. He gets his independence, and he feels this.
And you know exactly where he's at. Yeah.
I know exactly where he's at. I've got his phone tracked. Yeah. I'm not saying that nothing could happen.
Right.
But like,
you can't live your life like that either, though, right?
A little bit, right? That's
right.
Growing up.
And he has to learn how to navigate, right? If somebody seems kind of weird at the food court, okay, don't talk to the dude, move right along. And you naturally learn how to live life and navigate things and feel out yourself. Like, if that feels funny in your belly, like, don't pursue it.
That's a good way to put it.
There's a reason for that. And so, but it's like you said, I mean, you have to be careful, or I do worry, or I'll hear that, some kid said something in particular that, but you have to let them, because they have to figure it out,
Well, you can't handicap them to not be ready to go to the world when it's their time, but it's, so I was thinking about that, because what kind of, are you a nurse at a hospital?
I was. Okay. I can tell you what I do later, but yeah, okay. I did. So most of my experience was, until a couple of years ago, was in a hospital.
Okay.
I started out with adult. So I worked at Vanderbilt for a million years back in Nashville. I started out with adults, and I worked surgical ICU, with adult population, and then quickly went on to pediatric. So most of my career was pediatric ICU.
Okay. That's cool.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you saw crazy stuff then too. Like, I feel like, so my niece is a nurse. She's a traveling nurse right now, and she's got a sweet gig, dude. Her first job out, her first real job, she's already making more money than I made probably in the first 15 years with the company I'm with.
Especially as a travel nurse.
It's great.
But awesome. Like, and she has said, she's like, she was in the hospital system right about the time that COVID started, and they wanted them to get vaccinated, and she didn't want to go through that. So she left, but she was like, it's crazy the stuff you see come through the hospital. Like, you would not, as a normal person, if you don't deal with it, you don't believe it. And I was like,
out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. And I was like, that's crazy. I guess I could see that. So that's the reason for that question was like, because I feel like that probably makes like being a mom even harder,
Yeah. I mean, so it did in one way. It's funny, like, dirt and germs like that, I don't care. Or I see moms who are like, oh, dust it off and don't eat it. I'm like, just eat it, you're fine. Like,
no, everybody eats
second rule.
You're gonna be fine. The stuff that concerns me is the stuff that we just talked about. It's other humans, really.
Right.
Or when I was pregnant, like, things that were like congenital, things that you can have no control over, like
cancer or something.
Right. Heart defects, things that they could be born with that I cannot control, but I would see it come through, and we would work on these babies. And so that would heighten my awareness to the fact that exists and make me more concerned, or it would just be the normal stuff. Like, unpopular opinion, we don't have a trampoline. Now, if they go somewhere, they can jump on someone else's
the trampoline with the net. Isn't that supposed to save you?
Well, not when you break your neck. You know what I mean?
No,
and so it's
our
like,
neighbors have.
I would see
the girls have it.
I would see these. Well, and most kids do. That's what I'm saying. Like, most kids do. But these are the things that I would see that, or like, it was seasonal. So like, in the winter time, it would be, burns, lamp oil ingestion. You'd be surprised at how many people still use like lamp oil and those like kerosene type lamps, and then babies drink everything.
Really?
Oh, because it just looks like water. Weird.
I mean, you name it. So burns. That in the wintertime, there are certain ones. In the summer, drownings, right?
Yeah.
Drownings,
pools. We were in Arizona for years. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because trampolines are very dangerous. I mean,
I caught my neighbor girl climbed up on a roof to jump onto it, and I work like right up here. We're upstairs, and I see out the window. Or no, Beth calls me, and she goes, she's on the roof. And she goes, get her off the roof. And so I run down. I'm like, get off the roof.
Yeah. They have no, which is great. They have no fear.
Yeah.
Which is good and bad.
Oh yeah.
Right?
No, that's something I would have done if I'd had a trampoline.
We had a
get it.
Exactly.
If my kids had one, good gosh. I don't know what those boys would do. But
exactly. Because they're boys. They have no fear.
Yes,
girls don't either nowadays. You're like,
I didn't have any fear, but some girls do. But anyway, things like that. But then of course just the regular, disease process stuff, and then abuse. People do terrible things, but
people
I don't know.
That's
so
crazy.
It didn't really change. Like I said, at the end of the day, the stuff that I can't control, like the congenital stuff or disease stuff,
you're like,
or other humans, those are the things that concern me most with my kids.
Try and just limit your risk. We're in insurance, so we both work for an insurance company, and we see these things, and we, especially me, I was trained as an underwriter for an insurance company for 20 years or so. And you go, I see the risk in everything.
Yeah.
I always weigh out the risk, and you go, and that's kind of what
you're
you're
risk
talking
adverse,
about.
and I'm risk taker more than you are sometimes. Not a lot of things, but I'll
definitely
be
take the risk.
Do it.
I'm like, what's the benefit of this?
No, and I'm like, come on, it'll be fun.
What's the reward?
You'll take the risk. You're just not rash with it, is what you're saying.
Exactly. I don't know. It's kind of it's interesting. So, so let's get on to a couple of quick cases real quick. So there's this case that happened up in New York City, and I just want kind of your thoughts on it compared to some of the other things that have happened. This is going to be a pretty big case, I think moving forward. So this is the New York subway case with Jordan Neely versus, I don't want to say versus, the case where he died, unfortunately, after he was restrained, ended up dying at the hospital later on. So this was a situation where this gentleman, Jordan Neely, gets on the train on the subway, ends up getting on, threatening quite a few people. This has been corroborated through a lot of statements as well. It says, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I don't care, I'm ready to take everybody out, or whatever it ends up going with. So allegedly. A Marine or a gentleman, you wouldn't know he's a Marine, just a dude.
Yeah.
Grabs him, ends up taking him down.
Yep.
If you're familiar with jujitsu or anything like that, he basically grabs him from behind, gets him in a rear naked choke. It's not, from my opinion, it's not super tight, but he does have connected. He's got it kind of on the top of his head where his right hand coming across. So it very easily could constrict the carotid arteries.
Airway,
right? Not the airway.
The
blood
artery,
flow.
yes.
And that's what it is. A rear naked choke is a blood flow choke,
yes.
right? So it shuts your brain off. And the Marine, now that we know, was also assisted by two other people.
Right.
They were holding his hands.
Right.
And kind of holding, not necessarily fully restraining him, but definitely holding on to him. So it's not this Marine, we'll call him the Marine, was not acting on his own.
Right.
There were several people that, again, did corroborate this. And have you had a chance to look at this story at all?
Mm-hmm. I did briefly read up on it, and then I watched the video, because there is the video, like we talked about, footage of it. It's very short. So you guys, if you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. I watched it as we were just starting the show. It's like 45 seconds long, but it gives you a good picture of, like you said, not only was he not alone, no one was telling him, as an opposite to what we talk about a lot, or I don't on my show, but the boys will talk about on their shows, when people are taking videos of police arresting someone, or maybe having to have a struggle and get them on the ground, and you'll hear the people saying, get off him, without knowing what's really going on. You don't hear anyone saying that at all. And
context, it's the context behind it, right? And
you don't see anyone being, if they're alarmed because it happened, not because of what this guy is doing with his chokehold. Right. They just, I think they want the threat suspended immediately.
Right. Absolutely. Which makes sense, right? I mean,
you're in an enclosed subway.
You're in that little capsule.
You can't go anywhere.
Right. What happens if he pulls a knife, or he pulls a pipe out? Or you never know.
What is most of them? I've never been in a subway before, but they're kind of small, right?
It's
they're
literally
smaller than a bus.
Of a little tiny train. I mean, literally, you're sitting maybe a foot farther away from
South Texas. I've never even ridden
foot
in a train.
farther away than you are from me, right? And you have a bar, the tram going to the airport.
Okay,
something like that.
All right, that's
it's
perfect.
that big.
Okay, and I watched the video, and I was like, there, like you said, nobody was screaming, "Get off him!" or The other two guys, like the guy put up a fight. It's not like he got in this chokehold and then suddenly just went, okay, I'm done.
No.
He kept struggling to the point where those other people had to come in to help restrain him.
And he was they were constantly calling, saying, call the police, get the cops down here.
Yeah.
Right.
So where are you going? Like, what are your...
No, my question's like, when you think of it from the perspective, even like the guys on your show, or having a police perspective on that, right? Like a case,
right.
I think it's going to blow up. I think this case is going to blow up.
I think it will. Well, I'm concerned. I hope not. And I'm like you guys. I don't like to get political. This isn't political.
No,
but it is.
New York City, you don't have a choice.
Well, I was going to say my statement that I'm going to say now is going to sound political, and it's not, but I'm concerned this will be a race-related situation because the man that passed away is a black guy. The quote Marine is a white guy. I was trying to pull up as
two other gentlemen that were there.
Well, I was going to say, do we know?
I think one was Hispanic. He looked, it's hard to tell.
Right.
Yeah, but I think one was Hispanic and there was another gentleman there. But
well, and I so here's what makes me angry. And I'm going to say, I hate that it's going to become about race and not the detriment that this man could have caused. Yeah,
they're already trying to spin this guy.
Well, it should have been more about
Michael Jackson
this man who was a threat to people versus anything to do outside of he was just a man.
He's just a dude that was crazy. I don't want to call him crazy. I don't know.
Well,
but if you get on a train and you start threatening people,
so he was homeless. I'm just now seeing he actually, at the time of his death, had a warrant out for his arrest for assaulting a 67-year-old woman.
Punched her in the face on a train.
So there you go. Okay. And so they say that it says, so I'm reading
something like
the quotes
40
right now.
Prior arrests as well.
Mm-hmm. And granted, okay, they don't know that. I understand that. But when they say, let me see here. I was trying to read what some other people were saying. Anyway, when you all of the accounts, like you said that he was being aggressive. I'm not sure. I get that it's subjective as to what someone might consider aggressive speech or how they feel in the moment. But like we said, context, right? Context. They can't get up and get away. This isn't even a bus.
There's nowhere to flee to. Right.
Well, if it were a bus, a driver could stop and you could get off. Like they are in a subway, in a tunnel, perhaps, there's nowhere to go. So when someone is yelling and threatening and being like, take him down and wait. The guy said immediately, which I don't think there's any question in this. He said, I had no intention for this man to die, whatsoever. So,
but it was protecting. So that's kind of the thing where you hear the sheep be the sheepdog and stuff like that. This is where it can go sideways on you, which sucks nowadays.
Well,
like you want to protect people, and just like many Americans, you want to be able to protect people that are around you.
Well, here's the thing. So you said, I didn't know that about the 67-year-old woman he punched in a subway. What did the people around them do when he punched her? Like
probably grabbed their phones and started recording,
versus taking him down, making sure she was okay. So it's
question.
Like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Right.
But
I just pulled up the quote. I'm sorry, what it says to give an idea. It says he started screaming in an aggressive manner, says this witness, Juan Vasquez. It says he said he had no food, he had no drink, and that he was tired and doesn't care if he goes to jail. So this is a man that it says he took off his jacket, he threw it on the ground. So that's aggression. He's taking off his clothing, moving forward, saying, I don't care if I go to jail. He already has a warrant and he knows that. So this to me sounds like someone who just doesn't really care what happens to him. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's a part of him because he's hungry and tired. He's like, I'll get fed and slept in jail.
That's exactly it.
He's just
that's a big.
Well, but he's like, he's hangry, but he's like, if I get arrested,
I can go back.
Then I'll have some place to put my head down, and I'll get 3 square meals.
People do that. People do that on purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like most of us, I should say, pretty smart where we can tell aggression versus just subtext.
Versus desperation.
Yeah. And so, but what would have happened? You have to ask that question too. What would have happened if three gentlemen hadn't taken on the role that they took?
Somebody else,
could have been a baby, could have punched a baby. I mean, who knows what he's doing? It doesn't. And I just think that we shouldn't. That's a good question to ask. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure where the line is. Like, had he not died from this, would then the Marine be charged with assault?
Probably.
Or would it have been self-defense? You know what I'm saying? Like, or preventative, or just not looked at and brushed on the table because it's fine and it came and went and he went to jail and nobody's talking about it. Like, so I don't know. I'm with you. I'm concerned it's going to be a big case. And I really just think that it's, from what we can tell right now, it shouldn't be. It is what it is. It's
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate the dude passed away, but.
And it's always
for the guy who did it too.
I was going to say, because he's got to live with that now.
He was just going to work or going home.
Most of us aren't prepared to have somebody die by our hands.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, he's got to live with that too.
But and I'm always just sad that it's always the brave ones that are in the wrong, like they're
nowadays
in the wrong place at the wrong time.
That's what I'm saying. It's that sheepdog thing. You want, like, he was protecting everybody on the train.
Yeah.
He did what he thought was right. I think
I think that's why we have such a situation in the world today where people just stand by because they're worried about, well, what if I do that? Remember what, like, I remember growing up that people were like, well, doctors usually, if they're not on duty, they won't help because then they can be liable.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a horrible world we live in. If people who want to help,
you could get a medical malpractice.
But that's almost what it's like to live in today's world, to be a protector. It almost doesn't pay.
Let me tell you, I got a funny story on that, a tiny story. I guess it's not super funny, but a little bit. I have recently, in the past, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, just happened. And this is the last thing, especially if you've been a hospital worker, you don't want to encounter that. I'm not a first responder, right? I'm not an EMT. I'm not
but you worked in ICU. You worked in pretty serious scenarios.
I did. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I worked in very serious scenarios, but I also had my room set up and I had they could be ventilated, they could be intubated and put on
equipment
a ventilator.
You needed.
I have everything that I need right there. Right.
Okay.
So I have the knowledge. I just don't have the equipment outside of that. I'm in my personal vehicle. So I have come across, do you like how I did, I don't know why I had to act
were driving?
I do. Yeah.
Same here. Very handy.
That was awesome.
So I'm driving in my car down the road. And in the past couple of months, I've come across 2 car accidents that I happened to be the first responder. The first one wasn't very serious. It was a older teenage boy, and I think he was just very, very startled. I think he got a little nosebleed from it. He was going to be fine. He was sitting up and talking. The second one was a bit more serious. It was an elderly couple. Everyone survived, but she was lying in the back, kind of in and out of consciousness, wasn't really breathing very great. And didn't really know what was going on when she could speak, and a bit of blood there. But either way, in saying that, so I stumble upon the first one, the teenage boy one. I get out of my car and I'm always kind of like, oh God, like, not because I don't want to help, but like, or I'm going to be late, I'm going here.
I had 15 things to do today, and now I'm going to get 5 done.
I can't not stop, right? Like you're
as a human being. Yeah.
You have to.
It's the healer in you. Yes. Yeah.
Oh gosh. And so I pull over and I'm like, hey buddy, you okay? And as I'm talking to him, this guy runs up and he's got a backpack on. He's like, hey, how's it? I'm a nurse. I was like, okay. I was like, yeah, me too. Like, whatever. And he's like, hey, buddy. And I was like, I'm going to call. And I was like, cool. You got this? Like, all right.
I'm out.
All right. All right, guy. So then I come to the next one, right? Like another, I don't know, 6 weeks has passed. And I had left where I worked to go to a meeting somewhere else and was trying to rush back to where I work. And boom, car, telephone pole, the whole thing. And I'm like, oh gosh, and so I stop. And someone was already kind of in there. So when I said I was a nurse, they scoot out and I kind of get in the car and I'm trying to figure out, y'all. Then I hear, what's up? I'm a nurse. I turn around and it's Backpack Boy again.
The same dude.
And I'm like, yeah.
Wow.
Where are you coming from? Like, he's like this little,
he's like a superhero.
He's always on foot. I never see him getting out of a car.
Oh, wow.
He's in 2 different parts of town.
Maybe he's like Spider-Man or something.
He's got a radio that he can hear the calls come into the call center. He's like, oh, I'm right there. I'm going to go.
Right. Well, and the running joke is
maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. The running joke when I tell the story is that he's probably like, well, who is this chick? Right. Like, it's like, I'm always there, but I don't know.
But you're not carrying a backpack.
That's really kind of crazy. Have the accidents been in the same vicinity? I
mean, I don't live in a big town, but I mean, 15 minutes away, different parts of town.
Okay.
I mean,
the other side of the town.
They're not on one street
whatever,
and the next street over. But,
yeah,
that is crazy.
I don't know, but yeah, Backpack Boy is always ever present. So now I'm really
6 degrees of Backpack Boy.
Do you feel jealous that he's got a backpack?
That's hilarious. Wow. That's
I don't feel jealous that he's not driving a car because these are roads I don't want to walk on.
It's really humid there, right?
Oh yeah, it can
especially
be.
It's humid here in Texas too.
Not too bad.
Not too bad. Yeah, it's been unseasonably cool. I feel like like we had a couple of like super hot weeks, and then it's been like just pleasant, I should say.
Yeah.
Not cool, but like really nice.
We've had lately. A little bit of that, like especially for San Antonio. Normally once spring hits, you don't get too many, and we've had like some 50, 40 degree nights in the spring, but like today it's 83% humidity. Like I don't even bother brushing my hair.
It's starting to sprinkle. It just should be raining before the show started.
He'll look at me and he's like, "You're gonna go with that hair?" I'm like, "You want this or peppermint patty hair? Because if I brush it, I'm going to look exactly like Peppermint Patty, and it's going to be
you know what I say? I always say this is like day, I'm not going to tell you, of needing to be washed, but it's the only thing that keeps it from being so big.
She does that too, don't worry.
I always say that I'm Rosanna Dana for anybody who will get that reference, but like you're right. Like if I brush it immediately is like,
yep.
Or what's her name? Courtney Cox. What's her name? Monica on Friends when they were doing, remember the ping pong and her hair was like,
yeah, that's so funny. Yeah. Greg doesn't understand that as many days as you can go without washing your hair. Cause he has no hair. And I'm like, dude, washing your hair sucks. I mean, it's time consuming. You get out of the shower, you're all clean and fresh.
It just gets bigger.
Well,
and then she has to blow dry her hair, and it's
hot
like
to blow dry your hair.
She's like,
and
it's like, don't dry it in the summer.
You don't dry it at all. My hair gets really crazy, but
then I also super curls.
The what?
I was kind of looking at it to see. I was like, mine is tamed down now, but it's wavy, yes. And so like if it's dry and I brush it, it just gets big. So I do better to a little dry shampoo and maybe some oil of some sort or something
on the bottom. Yeah. But my whole thing is screw dry shampoo now because it's so damn expensive. Baby powder.
Okay.
Baby powder.
Good call.
I want to invent a dark colored baby powder. I'm sure it's probably somewhere already, but like they can make colored dry shampoo. They can make colored talc. You know what I'm saying?
Do.
So you have this.
I know
you
what
have this
saying.
problem firsthand.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
I hate it when that happens.
That's so funny. I have a buzz now, just so you know.
Congratulations.
Off of one mimosa.
Well,
that's how much alcohol
you're just reconnecting to last night is really what's happening. So it's all good.
Bridging the gap.
There you go.
Bridging the gap.
And my hangover's better.
So another weird kind of case that's going on. I don't know if you've been following this one. They call it the Rainey Street Ripper.
Yeah, that's close to you guys.
Yeah. So for people that don't know, there's been several, and this is going over years and years, that gentlemen have been, it's kind of a 20s to 30s type of age range. Single guy, I don't want to call them single, but lone dudes just walking down the street or whatever, and then they're never seen again. They're coming from hanging out with friends at a local bar, and this is in downtown Austin. And then they end up in the lake or the river or something like that.
Yeah.
So there's that going on. But have you seen there's a correlate? I don't want to call it a correlation because
there's a gentleman who's making correlation.
Well, there's an interesting perhaps connection to places like Chicago and Boston and these other cities where
big cities,
people are men, single men or lone men, are
individual,
on their own, walking home later at night and getting disappeared. Right. And you remember, have you ever looked into the smiley face killer?
I was going to say, it reminds me of.
Okay. So in the Rainey Street or the Rainey Street Ripper, quote unquote, they think maybe it's something like that. But we did a story on the Castro Files.
On the Castro Files, that one of my very first stories was about a young man who got kicked out of a bar and walked home and nobody ever saw him again. And then we also saw a very similar story.
Found him in a river.
Yes, they found him in a river
face,
with a smiley face next to the place where he popped up. But then we also
that was
saw
Ohio, though.
We also saw one on Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix. It came like the new version of it came back on Netflix. I don't even know if you've seen it, but they did the similar story with the kid who went missing. They thought he walked across, like they did the whole logistics, like if he walked across campus, blah, blah, blah. They also found him next to a smiley sign. So that's where I'm like, okay. So
but that was like 20 years ago.
Well,
some of those cases.
Been happening off and on for 20 years.
So you go.
They just have no idea. They don't have any
and what
suspects.
Could be a copycat
I think that seems more.
I feel like that's probably.
But if you have some old dude, there's a videos on like Instagram and TikTok. I don't know the guy's name. I was trying to find it. I couldn't find it in time. But he's trying to map everything out and see where these people in this specific, his thing is kind of specifically Chicago. And there's like 25 people or 20 people or something like that.
Right.
That have
there are 25 people that have had an incident, but 20 of them have shown up dead. The other 5 somehow got away.
Yeah. When you go back and you start thinking about copycats, I mean, Or is it something more? Do you have somebody here? Kind of a crew of people.
Do you have like the dark web people saying, hey, I'll do it here if you do it there, and I'll do it there? You know, it's kind of,
that's an interesting theory. I think that whenever we get into multiple suspects, it just gets harder to put your head around because somebody is going to mess up. It's just so much more room for error.
Somebody talks or somebody
talks,
slips,
somebody just slips somehow,
leave some sort of DNA by accident, a hair or,
especially these days, just like we were talking about between cameras, all the technology, and then the DNA technology that we have now, it's not quite as easy to do these things as it would have been 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's it. I was just going to say, so the idea of more people like that, it's actually kind of I don't want to say cool. It's kind of a neat, like a crazy thought, but I just feel like it's less likely. I do think there's copycats, and I just think that they're like the one in the Rainey Street one. What I have heard is pretty much what you've said. I've not even taken the time to look into it. I think right now, because it is so ongoing and big and current, that I'm kind of like, I know I'm not going to do it on my show right now.
Okay.
So I'm just kind of not getting into it too much. I wouldn't mind, kind of like we spoke on earlier, to at some point kind of take that one and then do some compare contrast to some of the other ones, like you said, like
that's
we know
why
about.
I kind of brought it up. It's like, there's too much going on with this one. And I think the Austin PD has not, they still are saying that there's no
correlation between the murders.
Right. Between the deaths. They're just like random dudes going for a swim after going to the bar.
That's not,
because aren't they all, if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I haven't, I'm speaking on it and I don't know that much about it, but if I'm not mistaken, didn't they all isn't their cause of death drowning?
Yeah.
Okay.
How many? Come on.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. And so that's why I think that's why they're saying there's no correlation.
Yeah.
Even if they think, they're not gonna, right? So that's one thing we talk about a lot.
In their full clothes, like their bar clothes, like you're going out clothes.
So they don't want to alarm people.
Exactly. That, or heads up to the person that's doing it. They want to make them comfortable.
So that's what we talk about all the time on the show is because the public gets so out and it's always like, well, they're not telling us anything. And it's not for you to know.
Yeah.
There's no reason you need to know that information, and oftentimes the victim's family is not going to know all the information.
That's very, because they don't have
you've got to protect the case.
Yes.
You got to protect what's going on. And as it's developing, that's what we talked about in the Delphi case with the two girls, Abby and Libby, that came off, they were 13 and 14 years old. And as it happened in 2017, as of 2022, this past October, all we know now, they've arrested the one guy, Richard Allen. Outside of that, we knew that there was a snippet of a video because the girls were filming on the bridge that said,
as soon as you said the bridge, it just clicked. I know that case. Yeah.
And it said, so at first they released where it just said down the hill. It's grainy audio. They have over a minute's worth of audio and video. They've only released to the public down the hill. And then 2 years later, they released one more word that said, guys, down the hill. And they released, I think it's a 3-second clip or something of him walking toward them. This man, which at the time, he didn't have to be the killer, right? We just have this guy walking toward them. He may not have been whatever. They've established they think he is now. But regardless, my point is, we know that they were found under the bridge. We know that it was they called it, and this was 2 or 3 years after it happened that they finally even said this. They called it very, very bloody. And eventually they said he took a souvenir. And they said that the bodies were posed. They did say that they were staged. But my point is, that's it. They didn't say how they died. They didn't say what had happened to them. They didn't
or what the souvenir.
Yeah.
Because that's very specific to the case,
and they're
right?
still very, very specific to the case. And they are still working that case. They are saying, make no mistakes. We arrested this man. And it was a huge deal. We did a big update on it. It was a very big deal that 5 years later, after being so tight-lipped, because the public's perception was that it wasn't being worked actively, right? And it was. And so when they arrested him, I mean, you have to make sure that you are arresting with full confidence that you can convict. And so
otherwise the trial could get thrown, or the prosecution could get thrown out, and then you get in
double jeopardy. So so they arrest this man, but there's still a gag order on the case. Everything is still just as quiet as it was before. It's not like all this information is coming out because they still are, vaguely saying that
there may be somebody else
very open to someone else being a part of it as well.
Okay. Yeah, well, I almost feel like investigating is almost like playing poker. You have to keep everything very close to the chest. And you can't give away what you have, because then you're allowing the person who has done it insight on how what you're looking at and what they should or shouldn't be doing, or you know what I'm saying, like
guilt information.
Yes.
You can't. You also don't want a false lead. You don't want someone calling in false tips, but they're using information they've heard you leak. So now it seems like a viable tip, but it's to lead you down the wrong path. So because they've heard you say it. So real quick, funny you just said close to the chest, because when Drew and I broke down a case one time. And I said that, they keep it close to the chest. And then Drew made the good point. He was like, is it close to the chest or is it close to the vest?
I've always heard
and
vest.
I was like, is it because I'm a woman? Like, do we just say that? I don't know. I was like, I'm not wearing vests. I don't know. Like, so
it's all just right here. Yeah, that's funny.
I don't know. I think I've always heard vest, but I mean, it makes sense. Chest.
It is vest.
Because if you're playing poker, you're gonna have it close to your chest. I don't know.
That's funny. Well, because you do play your cards close to your chest. You know, you're like,
or you leave.
I don't know. Physically, so I agree with you. I'm going with it.
No, I think that makes you made a great point. Is nowadays we're just insatiable for information, like
entitled to know everything.
Why can't you just tell us what happened?
People that thrive on these kind of situations,
100%.
Like,
and it's
they want the juicy details, even though they don't really need them
TMZ,
in their life.
Or you have the whatever, the news, you name the news organization that wants that first bit.
Yes.
Right. Because it drives clicks, right? It's nowadays, again, it's the social media bullshit that we're all going through.
And you got a chance to meet Milo, our kitten. Well, he's not really
he's the rescued cat.
He's the rescued cat who owns us now. But I love how he just comes up here and he's like, I don't care that you're in the middle of a show. I'm going to play with your phone case, sir.
Down on our stairs.
He jumped over the baby gate. So we have things to try to keep the animals out. Doesn't work with this one.
The dogs. Yeah. This one.
That's awesome.
He's funny.
Milo. So we talked about that. The rain. It's an ongoing thing. And again, it makes sense to just, hey, there's some people or there's some stuff going on, right? And I think that's with any case, right?
Right.
You have to keep it close.
It's still very active, guys.
It's
not even like it's happening as we speak. There's no way they're going to come forward and say
no. Nor should they.
Think about the panic.
Nor should
so
they.
There was like the Zodiac killer in New York City back in the 80s, right?
Yes.
I think it was the 80s, right?
So.
It literally caused like hysteria in New York City because of it, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, they were going after women and all the women. And I mean, granted, guys should probably if you're going to go home, hang out with a buddy. Don't get into a random car with somebody. Why would you anyway?
Not to go anywhere by yourself, right?
You didn't,
but we forget that we learned that
adults. Women learned that a long time ago, I think. You know what I mean?
I think dudes are just starting to figure it out. Like we were talking last night in the garage. We're just hanging out, shooting the shit. Beth and I, she's like, no, I can take care of myself, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, not against a big dude. Right. I mean, or
a lot
somebody
of guys
else, or somebody has a weapon
or a weapon.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to change this off course a little bit.
Go for it.
Because we're reaching that mark and I want to end on a fun note. Absolutely. So what's your favorite movie?
Steel Magnolias.
Why?
Steel Magnolias. I didn't see that one coming.
Yes. It just, I mean, I have
that was quick.
It was really quick.
Because it is. It always has been. Yeah, it always has been. I can quote, I can say it all. It's the whole thing.
Is that a Southern thing? I think I saw it like 20 years ago.
So funny story. My roommates in college loved that movie. And I would come home from class like on a Friday and I had never seen it. And they're just bawling their eyes out every time. And so finally one day I was like, why do you guys watch this movie? All it does is make you cry. Like, I don't get it. And they're like, but it's just so beautiful. And I'm like, yep.
It is, and it's not all sad. Like the sad part is very, very, very sad, but the rest of it is not.
Yeah.
And it's
and I think I always came in at the sad part because I finally saw it. One time I watched it with them and I was like, I hate you guys.
Oh God.
But so
excuse me.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to answer his question, is it Southern? It's supposed to be. It's Julia Roberts in a very terrible, terrible Southern accent.
Okay. All right. That's what I don't want to call it out. But
it's like Sally Field and they all Olympia Dukakis and Shirley MacLaine and it's the whole thing. But Daryl Hannah, it's good. But
I forgot Daryl Hannah. Holy shit.
Yeah. The accents are horrible.
Well, I like yours. Yours is cute.
Is in it. Well, thank you.
Yes.
I heard a lot about it when I first got the show.
It's awesome.
I think it's a bit of character.
I lived in Raleigh for a handful of years. My dad was a Marine.
What's your favorite movie, babe?
What's my favorite?
I don't think I've ever asked you that.
Happy Gilmore.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. Of course. It's Happy Gilmore. It always will be. Like, it's just the dumbest, funnest.
Yeah.
I like very lighthearted kinds of things. I don't need to get all serious. Yeah. I'll watch a series.
Is that the Stop Looking at Me Swan one?
Yeah.
Or is that Billy Madison?
That's Billy Madison.
I get them all mixed up.
Happy Gilmore's the golf one.
I knew it was golf, but I can't remember any,
Billy Madison. Billy Madison's.
And the chick from Modern Family is the main female in that, which is hilarious, by the way.
Hot. Huh? The females in both.
Yeah. So mine is Greg gives me shit for this all the time. The Mummy. I'm a sci-fi girl.
But the original one.
The original one, not the Tom Cruise one. And not the third one. Like literally the original Brendan Fraser when he was still really hot. The Mummy. I could watch it every time I drive. I have very specific movies that I watch now just because I know Greg's like, oh my gosh, you have that on TV again. It's Ghostbusters 2, and The Mummy. Because at least one of them is on
every single minute
on the weekends every day. So it's funny. But that's mine.
That's good. I haven't seen that one in forever, but that is good.
Do you get into any sort of books or anything like that? Is kind of down that line? You have time?
I do. Right. So there's that. I do. I enjoy it, but I don't have and right now we're in full swing of baseball season and both boys play and then the show. And now that we're trying to do Patreon, now it's like 2 shows a week we're trying to do. And work.
Prepping for shows is it takes
prepping for shows takes a while.
Do an hour of show or whatnot, but it takes you 4 hours to prep. I think a lot of people don't realize, the amount of work that goes into it. So,
well, and then if you work full time on top of that, you're like, I just want to sleep sometimes, So totally get it.
Yeah, sleep is the one thing. It's funny that seems expendable. That's the part that doesn't.
There's only so many hours in the day. That's why you're up
tomorrow
midnight or something like that.
Some other time.
Yeah. I'm a big reader. That's why he asked. Like, I would, if I could do anything, I'll just read all the time.
Yeah.
So we're gonna start a podcast for.
So I do really like sci-fi stuff.
She doesn't read
paranormal stuff, but I read a lot of smut books. They're hilarious. I love them. They're funny. I love. I used to watch the Hallmark and sex. Yes. I used to watch the Hallmark Channel religiously. And then I started reading and I was like, reading the romance novels is so much better than Hallmark because they actually have sex and kissing and stuff in it. So that's me. So I'm So I'm actually, I'm fixing to start another 30-minute podcast called Beth's Naughty Reads where,
I like that.
Where we're going to, we're still working through it. I'm either going to have people on with me and have friends do it with me every once in a while or bring on some of the lesser known authors because I think it would benefit them.
Yeah. You could do both. You could even do a quasi book club,
That's what it is.
That's book club, right? And have your girlfriends, read either 4 chapters of it and come on.
Oh, that's a good idea though. Because I was like, nobody has time to read a whole book.
And these are books that take you at 2, 3, 4, 5 hours.
Well, it depends on the person, right? Because not everybody's going to read through it that quickly.
That's what I was going to say. It's kind of just depends.
And how you read it. I read on electronics because I'm dyslexic and I can't read in a book. Okay. I can't. But I can read on my iPad through the Kindle app, and I can read a 5-hour book in 3 hours. So I've gotten pretty good about that. But I picked up the book the other day. I told him, I go, it's the 4th and last book in a series. And when she told me it was a 15-hour book, I was like, nope, not reading it. I don't care how it ends. I don't need anything that long in my life to figure out they're going to end up together.
Right.
So, but yeah,
what really got you?
Well, then I might have you. Maybe I'll send you a book and read 4 chapters.
I'll do it.
And
what really got you into that though?
What?
Christian Grey.
Yeah, 50 Shades of Grey. I didn't watch it when everybody was going through their 50 Shades of Grey. I refuse. I'm that girl. If it's super popular, I won't do it until it's died.
I'm the same way.
And then the pandemic happened and it was on TV and I was like, what the hell? I'm going to watch it. And then I was like, I'm going to read the book and holy shit. I was like, woo, these books are good. Babes, where you at? Let's go.
I never saw, you know what? I never saw the movie. I never
did you read the books though?
The books and the movie are very different.
The first book. And that would have
Do you think it was ridiculous?
A long time ago. Yeah. That I did read, I think, when it came out. I'm like you, much like that now, especially I don't get on anything when it's
a trend,
when it's happening. At all. That book I did, I think I was working in the hospital and that's the girls were reading it. I don't know, but I do remember reading that book, but I never saw the movies. So.
The movies and the book are very different.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Which I didn't know that. I watched the movies first and then I read the book and I was like, oh, the books are better. I get it. You have 2 hours.
Is the case.
You have 2 hours in a movie. You can't put 5 hours of book, So I may reach out to you sometime, be like, be my friend. I'll send you a bottle of wine. Cause that's the other thing I'm going to do is whatever wine I'm drinking, I'm going to send to the person who's on the show with me so we can drink the wine together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's
little
do
tit for
it.
tat.
Yeah.
So
I'm down.
What's the next case you're digging into? What are you looking at?
Yet.
Just highlight. You don't get into it, but you know what I mean? Give a little snippet if you could. Is there anything particular that's kind of going on?
Yeah. So what we've been kind of concentrating on a little bit is some kind of not changing the show. So if anybody is listening that does listen to my show, we're not changing anything. Yeah. We're just it's not going to be serious. There's still going to be humor. It's just not going to be great, because I'm really trying to when I say button it up, I've been reaching out. I've had some correspondence with some family members of some of the victims. There's some detectives that I've talked to or have reached out to about some of the prior cases we've covered, if they're still ongoing. So I'd like to start occasionally bringing some of these people on, or at least getting some statements.
That'd be cool.
So if they're doing that, they're going to watch our show, right? And they're going to hear, in fact, the case that we covered, Sky Adewale from Washington State case, I covered it with the investigative journalist that covered it at the time years ago. And then cool. A woman, Abby on Being a Police Officer, is another podcast that she's out on the West Coast. She does a lot with law enforcement. She's a civilian that interviews law enforcement to try to give civilians that idea of things. Yeah. Exactly. And so I had her and that journalist, Linda Byron, on to talk about that case because they lived in the area at the time and were but in saying that, that whole day and the day before leading up to the show, I was in contact with the father. This is a 2-year-old that went missing. The speculation is that the mother had the involvement. She's never been charged. It's a kind of a strange case. Her car's on the side of the road and he was gone, and it's weird. But I was in communication with the father that whole day prior. He's asking about the chats, asking about the YouTube link, like he was going to watch it live. So for these reasons, I do want the show to grow, and I want to continue to have these
mature, maybe. Yeah, is that kind of the way? It's not as
sure,
not as
because
goofy.
there's still like
it's not that it's
right.
Goofy. I know what you're saying.
But you're right.
You're right. Serious.
And because these, especially if I'm just talking about those crazy cases like that Catherine Knight that we talked about in Australia, that's different. We can be a little. That's farther removed. It's. Mm-hmm. If I'm talking about something that's cold or ongoing, it's a current.
And there's people that you want to interview.
And you have to think about the situation too. Yeah, like every situation's different.
Well, and what we've realized is that while we feel small, or I say small and insignificant, we you don't know really when you're talking, you don't expect to think that maybe a victim's family is listening,
right,
from a state across the
anywhere
across the
country or world. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, so what we've learned, but they have. Because they've reached out. So, because if you do have a missing child or a missing loved one or an unsolved case, and now in the day and age of podcasts and things like this, all you have to do is I would Google it. I would look up things and see if anybody's talking about it. And then, and so then our show might pop up, not because they were listening to us. You know what I mean? So anyway, in saying that, we're really looking forward to it. Eric has a silly show on Monday nights with, JD White, who is a former cop, and they do kind of like a silly comedy type cop comedy something or other on Monday nights.
Right.
So my show is Tuesday. He does his last call. He records it on Wednesday for our paid members, but then it drops on Thursday, and that's kind of like current events, things to help you talk about things that aren't, if you're a police officer and that's your whole life, you can come home and talk about pop culture events,
normal life, news, exactly,
normal life,
just outside of
your
that,
friends and family. So he and our
that's great.
He and our buddy Josh at Steadleg Media do that one on Thursdays. Thursday night then is the Comm Center one with Jonathan and Drew, and that's a bit of a more serious one as well, in the sense that they break down 911 calls and they play the call, and then as former law enforcement and John being a current 911 dispatcher, they talk about the case from that perspective as well. And then Friday is like the flagship show where Drew and Eric break down the cases. But in saying that,
Fridays are 10 or 11
You're very
Eastern
busy.
Standard.
You guys are very busy.
Yes,
something
exactly.
like that. Yeah,
exactly. So in saying that, we have room to make the shows kind of a variety. So there's the sillier
awesome.
ones, they can be a little more like the Monday one and the last call can be fun out there. Tuesday night, listen, guys, we still have fun. So it's not going to be just buttoned up like that, but just keeping things in mind like that.
Yeah,
I think it's more being just respectful. You absolutely have to when you're talking to somebody that lost a family member, like they just don't even know what happened to that family. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Taking it more seriously. I appreciate that. You know what I mean?
Well, levity is good
fun
too, but you have to be respectful of the conversation as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Of course. So we're pumped. And so moving forward,
it's awesome.
This Tuesday, I don't know. We'll see. It's sometimes I have 2 or 3 things in my mind, and it depends on what, just like whatever iron strikes that I'm like,
that's cool.
That's the one we're doing.
There you go. That's awesome.
So this week I'll be a little bit less prepared, but you won't know it on Tuesday. So just know that's a secret.
That's part of it, right? You never know until
that's the behind the scenes.
We literally write. I write the show, and Beth writes the show up until about 20 minutes before.
Well, it used to be like that, but we're like I said, we're really good friends with all our neighbors. And now that it's nice, everybody starts coming out with their beverages at 7.
Yes.
And so I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm going to go sit outside.
She's like, I'm not contributing anymore. I hope you got enough content.
Like, I have 4 stories for you. If you need more than that, you better go find some because I'm done. I'm drinking now.
So we normally try and have like 15 in the log.
Oh,
and we just hit the ones that we kind of pick too. So real quick, just before we kind of wrap up today, and again, Andrea, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
What suggestions, like you had said at the beginning of the podcast, it's like you go into podcasting, you're on camera for the first time, kind of like what you said. What suggestions would you have for other folks, to get into it, to try it, to think about it?
Love the face.
The internet, perhaps, making sure your internet connection's stable.
Okay, that's cute. Look, let me tell you something about the internet. It is not my internet. It's never been my internet. My internet is fine. That's the running joke. If you've seen the show, I'm always lagging. I think there was a bug with Chrome. It doesn't. Whatever. It's super funny stuff. But I'm always coming to everyone with like stop animation. I feel like, and it's like it's a joke on if you can even see me on the show.
You're good now. Yeah, you're totally good now.
Yeah. So make sure your internet is stable and secure and you don't have any bugs or don't need to update your computer. Make sure it's plugged in. I don't know because like I said, I stumbled into it. Like I literally stumbled into doing this. I had not had an intention to do it. And I think for me, it's like you guys touched on, it's fun. It's not, I'm not over here raking in dough for it. And it does take time, but it's also enjoyable. And I'm talking with my friends and we're talking about things that matter to me and things that are important. And so I really enjoy it. And I think that's life, right? Like you're going to naturally do something well or better if you're having a good time doing it. Yep. And then, and if it's not a struggle to make it happen. So, that's really just it. Just have a good time. Like there's too much stress in the world that a podcast shouldn't be one of them.
It shouldn't add to it. Yeah. There's a little bit of stress on us as kind of the producers, just like
there is,
but that's fine. Yeah. I'm willing to go through
different
that
kind of stress.
Put some entertainment out there and put some fun out there, something interesting. And
you're my stress. You're my stress when it comes to the podcasting. No, I'm kidding, but yeah, you are. No. So that's awesome. The only piece that I would say is I remember I did it as a work training thing and it was about starting a podcast and somebody was like, don't stop. Even when you feel like nobody's watching or listening, keep going, keep recording, keep putting shows out because it feels that way for everyone until you become like the person. So that was my only piece was like, keep going. Even if you feel like it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. You only get better at talking.
Go to 300. Cheers. Cheers. 300.
I said cheers.
Oop, I know. I just said
cheers.
Thank you.
Hey guys, real quick. How long did it take you? You said the pandemic, right? Because I was going to say, how long did it take you to get to 3 years?
So we probably should be
300. I'm sorry. 300.
Started March 24th, 2020 on our back porch with an iPhone.
Yeah. Okay. And we've had some couple, like we've done like for 99.5, 99.6.
Because our internet sucked.
Yeah. But we were also waiting to get somebody on the show. So like
this one
would do the, the
299. This is
299.1, 299.4 until we could do the 300. So we're probably at about 325.
325 of the bar is open. Yeah. We've got 40-ish Castro files, which is our kind of paranormal kind of that.
Yeah. And they're short. They're only like 20 minutes. So we keep those short and fun.
And then
that's a lot of fun.
But we've done probably close to 400 total shows.
If only I could make money off
just
of it.
all sorts of different, because we did 30 or 20 that were kind of like just our things to just try and grow the audio podcast and stuff like that.
So it took a few years.
The best part is like I get to have a conversation with her for a few hours in a
intentional,
week,
uninterrupted,
directed, and we talk about goofy things.
Yeah,
because life can be way too serious,
right?
Absolutely,
vast majority of the time, and with all the shit going on around us, and you see the mainstream news is like that's why I try and bring up the exorcism chief, police chief, or just some goofy thing with somebody inserted something weird into themselves.
That's usually the whiskey nights.
In the hospital. There's
that's
all sorts of dumb
That's when I'm drinking whiskey that I'm like, listen to this story.
And then we did a whiskey review for a long time, and we've got 40 of those, so we just try different things, and it's just kind of one of those
Love
things.
it.
So,
it's not about what works, it's about what works for us. You know what I mean?
Hey, look, that should be everybody's motto, right? I'm with you.
Make your life as happy as you can be. So we try and leave on a feel good. And what a feel good is just whatever makes you happy.
What makes you smile?
What makes you smile for the day. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Andrea. Like, what's a feel good for you?
Oh gosh. A few things. But so most currently in my head right now, when I leave here, I'm going to go to the beach. I've got nothing else I have to do today.
Nice.
I mean, I'm looking around. I could clean. I'm not doing
that. It's overrated.
Not doing that. The kids are gone just kind of for the afternoon. So I'm just going to kind of camp out there for a little bit. Music. Nice. I'm big. Music is always playing. I can't not have music playing all the time. So, like a little special someone and some music and the beach and my kids. I'm a happy clam. It doesn't take a whole lot, really.
That's awesome. That's perfect.
Yeah.
What's yours?
I asked you first. What's yours?
My feel good is just hitting number 300, like I said, and being able to spend a lot of time with you.
Yeah.
We talk, Beth and I, we have a very, very kind of open communication line. Like she's pissed at me. Obviously she'll tell me.
That's how it has to be. But
absolutely. But if you don't, you're screwed. Right. Yeah. So I'm going to say my feel good is you, Beth, sitting on this, doing this. This is a hobby that was mine that she has. Sometimes you don't want to do it. And she's like, God damn it.
I don't feel like it tonight.
And then we get on and we do it anyway. And by the end of the hour and 20 minutes or so, it's just like we reconnect a couple times a week. So what's yours?
My feel good is, totally unprepared for once. Just really being able to be where I'm at in my life right now and having the confidence to do something like this, but then not take myself too seriously. Cause let's face it, I'm a jackass sometimes and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Perfect.
So.
We all are.
Yeah.
So, Andrea, where can everybody find you? I know you've named it a couple times throughout the show, but you mind going to?
So the show is Failure to Stop. My show specifically is Night Shift, which is on Tuesdays. Instagram is Andrea Up Late. And then on the Patreon side of things, John and I are going to do Difficult to Look at Pictures is his on Instagram. He and I are doing one called Night Shift Overtime. And so he and I, we've already dropped our first one. We just kind of dove more into a case that's already been covered. But yeah, so Andrea Up Late is the Instagram for that.
Nice.
Perfect. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Having fun with us today.
It's been awesome
appreciate it.
Hanging out. Hope to have you back again.
I love it.
Some point. We've been talking about getting out to North Carolina. Yes. Like I said, I lived in Raleigh for a bit. It's just going out there and showing she's never been to North Carolina. Go out there, check it out.
Got a place y'all can stay.
There you go. All right.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for hanging out with us for our 300th episode.
Thanks, guys. We love you.
A long time in the making, but we appreciate it. Go out, subscribe to the podcast out on YouTube, and you can follow us on iTunes, Spotify, all the places you would normally find in a podcast. Thanks and cheers, everybody.
Bye, guys. Love you.